You know, it makes me think of a recent episode we did on our other show, America Uncovered, about the latest U.S. aircraft carrier that was kind of a disaster.
I don't know if it was a disaster, but there were these elevators that were like missile elevators, right?
Yeah.
And it was just like really over budget and took a lot longer to get that technology in place than they said it was going to.
Right, that's the USS Ford, and it's had a lot of problems. And this is, I mean, I don't want to be critical of people that have built this, but the fact of the matter is we're having tough times developing warships and getting them to sea to be operational. Some people are critical of that criticism and saying, well, that's not fair. We've always had this history of development with the Navy, and it takes time to work out the kinks. And there's some truth to that, but the fact of the matter remains, we've had, it's kind of like the baseball thing. You get 3 strikes and you're out. We've kind of had 3 strikes: the Ford class aircraft carrier, the LCS, Littoral Combat Ship, and then the Zumwalt class cruiser that has no weapon that can shoot anything, even though it costs like $1 billion a pop. So those are 3 ships over the last 20 years or more that we've tried to field, and they've kind of been flat. They have been unsuccessful in many ways, while on the other hand, we talk about the PLA Navy and what they've done. This is the concern, is that as a nation, we haven't developed our shipyards. We haven't built up that shipbuilding capability to be able to compete with China. Even if Congress came in and said, we're going to give you $800 billion in 2022 to build a 600 ship Navy, it can't be done. We physically can't do it. So there's got to be other things that we can do. And I think that's maybe the frustration I have in my mind, is we're stuck in a place where we have to do asymmetric kinds of nibbling on the edges. But that still doesn't mean that we don't stand up and say we need to build a big Navy, and that needs to be a Navy that can compete and defeat the PLA Navy. I think we need to do both.
Now, outside of an actual war with China over Taiwan, and you kind of hinted at this, but maybe it's better to spell it out a bit. Like, why should Americans care if China has a big Navy that's bigger than the U.S. Navy? It's not like, if they're not going to go to war with us over Taiwan, then what does it matter?
Well, first of all, I think they will go to war over Taiwan if Taiwan doesn't knuckle under by 2030. And secondly, once China has that kind of capability to control the oceans and to say who can pass and who can go, look what China did with Australia this last couple of years, year and a half or so. Scott Morrison, the prime minister, asked a question in the UN and said, hey, can we ask how this thing started with the virus? And China came down on Australia like a ton of bricks and said, we're not going to buy anything from you. We're going to put an economic embargo on you, a blockade, essentially. They didn't have to do it with their Navy, but they were able to successfully not buy things from Australia. Now, the Australians were clever enough and they figured out other markets to sell. Well, what happens when you have a Navy that can stop the Australians from selling their ore and their lobsters and their wine and their wool and other things to other nations? What happens if Chinese warships interdict Australian commercial vessels and prevent them from exporting their raw goods? The same thing can be done to the United States or to Europe or to Latin America or other parts of Asia. That's the real concern, because we know that the Chinese Communist Party is no respecter of rule of law. They talk about that, but we know they're not. So when they have the power, there's an old song from the 70s called, what are you going to do when the rabbit's got the gun? When they have the gun, when they have the capability, what are they going to do with it? And some people say, oh, well, they'll be benign because they don't want to disrupt global trade. Maybe, but we also know that when they don't get what they want, or somebody stands in defiance to them and asks a simple question, the communist ideology is to take a sledgehammer out and bash them over the head. And we know that the Chinese have talked about, they set up that air defense identification zone in the East China Sea back in 2014 as a way of, they didn't really comprehend what an aid was for, but the idea that they did it for was to say, well, we can control who flies in our air defense identification zone. So they have this tendency already to say, we'll control who can go where and when. We've seen some reports that say even in the South China Sea that there's plans to set up corridors. They've talked about it. Well, we'll have a corridor here, and you'll transit via this corridor through the South China Sea. And if you deviate from your track, we're going to smack you around, maybe.
Didn't they pass a law or something saying that, ships have to identify themselves to the Chinese Navy?
Yeah, they did. That's a great point. They've already come out and said in naval matters, their interpretation of the United Nations Convention Law of the Sea says that any other foreign navy must check in with the Chinese and identify themselves and where they're going and where they came from, etc. And nobody's paying attention to that right now. But since October of 2015, the Chinese Navy has shadowed every foreign warship that's gone into the South China Sea, not just American Navy, every other nation that's gone in there. So who's to say once they dominate in the naval arena that they're not going to extend that to commercial shipping? And once they do that, once they start taking control of the market like that, that will have a direct impact on Americans' lives. Whether you're a business owner or an investor, or you're just somebody that wants to go, get what you normally get, whether it's food or clothes or tools or whatever it is, they will control that system, and that'll control your life.
I think a lot of Americans don't even realize how the Chinese Communist Party essentially blockaded medical supplies from the United States in the early days of the pandemic, let alone have this concept that in the future, China could be capable of blockading global supply chains, of effectively being an authoritarian power capable of sanctioning any country they want. What do you think is it going to take to get the American public aware of this threat?
Well, I think, we've been 2 years into this kind of people asserting powers for an emergency. And we're starting to see around the world, people wake up and say, hold on a minute. The emergency's for 6 months. We're now 2.5 years into this. Why are we still saying emergency? Why are you still, say playing Simon Says with me? Simon says, wear a mask. Simon says, don't wear a mask. Simon says, stand on your foot. People are starting to wake up about that in a larger sense, but they haven't really identified and linked it exclusively, or not exclusively, but to the real serious one, which is from China. Because China will have, as I keep saying, the gun. They'll have the military power to enforce whatever they dictate. They'll have the economic clout as well. They'll use comprehensive national power to get what they want. They didn't want to launch a war against Australia this last 2 years. But if it got down to it, they would do that. You've had people, Chinese acolytes and advisors, and like Victor Gao say, hey, now that Australia has signed into the AUKUS submarine deal, the Australia, UK, US submarine deal, you've now put yourself on the nuclear targeting list of the PLA. That's pretty provocative.
I do think that is one area where it's kind of breaking through the general malaise of American society. People were a little worried about China has a bigger Navy, but you can dismiss that, whatever. But there's still this big fear of nuclear war. And I think people were kind of beginning to pay attention when it's oh, wait, China just built over 100 nuclear missile silos in Xinjiang. And then a month later, oh, here's 100 more. And I think there is almost people can kind of understand oh, wait, they're building nuclear weapons. The PLA rocket force might be, maybe this is a threat.
Yeah, we've never been at nuclear war. The U.S. has dropped 2 bombs, 70 years ago, but we've never been in an actual nuclear war where opponents were using them against each other. How does that even happen? What triggers that?
Well, we don't want to trigger that. We want to deter that, and you have to deter it across not just nuclear weapons and nuclear arsenal, but you have to have the conventional piece as well. If they're linked together, they're not separate. And we understood that in the Cold War with the Soviets. And so we always maintained that advantage. I'm sitting here in a house, it's 100 years old, and in the basement there's a nuclear shelter, bomb shelter. All the houses in Switzerland have them. Americans in the 1950s and early 60s, when you went to school, you crawled under your desk when the air raid sirens came out because you were preparing for how you survive a nuclear attack. So it's something that we've lived under It's not something that's fun and convenient to talk about, but it's the ostrich strategy doesn't work either. I mean, and so I think Chris is right. I mean, I'm starting to hear some of it, but we've built in this kind of, with this engager school, the engagement school, we've built in this almost a psychosis, which says we really never can fully say China's a threat. We're never really going to say it, even though there's 350 of these ICBM silos out now in central China that have been built in the last 6-7 months. We're still, I mean, to me, when I saw those images that you've all seen over the last half year, 9 months, whatever exact time frame it is, when I saw those, it was chilling to me, because it really meant that we had been so asleep that we just dismissed back in 2012 warnings from people, that had been in the Reagan era, our seniors, people that had fought the Cold War, and we had ignored their warnings from a decade ago to say, hey, China's going to build a nuclear arsenal. It was scoffed at. It was literally scoffed at by the U.S. intelligence community. They said, nah, that's nothing to worry about. That's being hyped. That guy's a wacko. And now here we are with, right in our face.